Welcome to the Rogue Recap. Hot takes, cold facts, and zero respect for the official narrative. Sit back, roll your eyes, and let's recap. Rogue style.
Welcome, everybody, to the Rogue Recap. This is episode 7 of Soundbytes. I'm here with my great friend, Eric Eggers. Eric, how are you today?
I'm well, but it occurs to me that something's changed in this episode. You know, we talk about some potentially troubling aspects of what's happening in American society and some things to be worried about. And you and I have never appeared to be more in tactical gear than we are in this episode. Like, I think we both look like we might be ready for something. That's an accident. I just want everybody to know. Like, we don't know anything you don't know as far as that goes.
My son, the other day, we were coming in from somewhere, running errands, yada, yada. And I always carry, always. So I was looking for something in my purse, and he goes, "Mom, is that a gun in your bag?" And I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "Man, you're just ready, right, Mama?" I'm like, "Yeah, baby. Mama's always ready." I was like, it's never going to be a moment where I'm going to say, "Damn, I wish I had my gun." It's going to be like, "Damn, I'm so glad I have my gun." So he started laughing, but it made me think. I was like, God, the world we live in.
Right. I also am always ready. And by that, I mean, I am always ready to call Lynda to take care of whatever the problem is.
I am wearing running sneakers.
While I'm curled up in the fetal position. So
I'm telling you, man, every time I go to the range, I just think to myself, everybody, like this is such a pivot, but it's like, you got to practice. You got to go to the range. You got to practice, and I have a non-lethal weapon and I have a lethal weapon. I'm going to shoot you first and just try to knock you down so that you knock it off. And then if you don't knock it off, I'll just shoot you in the kneecap so you can't come after me. I'm not going to, sometimes it's center mass because I want to end it because you're, a rapist or a murderer. Maybe you should though, but if you're just like stupid and you're like screaming and maybe you're jumping on my car, I'll just shoot you in the kneecap, knock you out. You're going to need some surgery. It's going to be a pain in your ass, and you're not going to bother anybody for a while. You're not pushing anybody down subway steps. Honestly, I should get an award for that. I'm helping the public.
I'm just glad that we could, it took 7 episodes for us to use the phrase center mass in the first 2 minutes of an episode, but we did it. And it worked naturally, organically. And this is a new show, but here we are. So. Well,
welcome to episode 7 of our new show. Last night, so we're recording this on Wednesday, May 27th. And last night, John Cornyn got the shit kicked out of him. For those of you who don't know, I hate John Cornyn. I hate John Thune. I hate every rhino establishment piece of shit in our Congress. And it was so nice to see a victory. And super stoked about Ken Paxton winning. People are like, "Oh no, he's going to go up against Tallarico." I'm like, Tallarico is talking about vegan meat and trans kids. Like, this is not something that Texans give a rip about. I'm sorry. I really have difficulty with this guy. What do you think?
I thought Ken Paxton's line, he told a little mini Trump, right? He had a few different kind of nicknames for Mr. Tallarico, but I thought his nickname Jimmy Six Genders was pretty good. So I think
it's really fun.
But it is interesting, and I am ignorant a little bit about the seeds. I mean, I know some of why you find Mr. Cornyn, former Senator Cornyn, to be distasteful, but then some of these clips we have of him, I think, maybe shed some more light on what you believe about the future former senator from Texas.
Yes, I'm not even going to set them up. I'm going to play them for you guys, and then we'll talk on the other side. Here's cut 1 of Cornyn.
Are you certain that you will run for re-election in 2020? You are?
Yeah.
You think the Texas...
I mean, God willing.
Well, yeah, I mean, exactly. Senator, what does it cost?
Inshallah.
What does...
That's cut 1. In case you didn't hear it, somebody asked him, "Do you think you're going to win?" And he said, "God willing," or "Inshallah," because suddenly he's fluent in Arabic. Give me a break.
Hi, I'm Texas Senator John Cornyn. I want to take a moment to say, I know this year's Ramadan will be different from those before, and that's why it's important to keep the spirit of hope and community alive. I wish you all a good fast and that you and your friends and families stay safe during this challenging time. Ramadan Mubarak.
So yeah, a lot of really good highlights there of why Cornyn didn't win, because we've got massive issues in Texas with this lack of assimilation and an influx of radical Islam, right? So people everywhere are going, yo, man, this is Texas. We've got a gajillion people from India, a gajillion people from Arabic nations. None of them are speaking English. They're taking our jobs. They're taking over our streets. They wanted to build the Epic Center. Oh, and guess who was helping with the funding for all of that? John Cornyn's daughter. So needless to say, not a big shock why some people, instead of saying, yo, man, it's Texas, yeehaw, and here's some steak, he's like, inshallah, Mubarak.
Well, we're going to hear from Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Fry later in the show, but it reminds me, these videos of John Cornyn remind me of when the Democrats in the House like put on like the kente cloth, and they kneeled. And they're kind of like cosplaying as like culturally aware or sensitive, or at least in touch with a culture that's not theirs. Look, I have Muslim friends, and what I would love to know is how many of them are like, who I love? John Cornyn. It really meant a lot to me that he wished me a happy Ramadan. That was a big deal. That Republican in Texas. That's what I was looking for to help kick off my fast.
I just think it's so true.
Needless. It's needless. And also, when you have, ultimately, John Cornyn lost because he was not a fan of and not a supporter of helping Donald Trump. And so many people in the Republican base want to pass the SAVE Act, right? Bottom line, if they supported things that are actually important to the base of this party, then I think it's a different story. So when you seem to, and I'm sure you could pull clips of him doing other things, but when you appear to be interested in appeasing people that are not your kind of core constituents and not doing the things that the people who voted for you want you to do, then you find yourself out of office, and that's exactly what happened.
100%. And I think too, he's been in office for 24 years. So 24 years as a sitting senator. What have you done for me lately? Absolutely nothing.
Well, listen, I remember, and this is, kind of a deep cut, but so I live in Tallahassee, Florida. And I remember in 2010, like this first kind of sea change election we had a governor named Charlie Crist, and he was going to run he was a Republican, right? And he could have run for re-election as governor, and as a Republican would have been reelected. And then he would have been set up, kind of quite nicely as a presidential hopeful. Instead, he chose to run for Senate, and he chose to run for Senate against the former Speaker of the Florida House, who didn't have much of a national profile named Marco Rubio. And so, but John Cornyn, then the head of the National Republican Senate Committee, endorsed at the time Charlie Crist over Marco Rubio. He was considered to be the front runner. Obviously, Rubio ended up kind of like winning in the primary, and then Crist drops out, ran as independent, the whole thing. But, so Cornyn has a long history of maybe not exactly being in touch with the most conservative aspect of the party.
And to that point, when we think about not being conservative, so the Save America Act, which is pretty interesting to me, has an 84% approval rating, but it's bipartisan. So people on the left, people on the right are both saying, you know what? I'm all in on us having honest and elections with integrity. Great. Let's try that, right? Something new. Who knows? But then you have John Thune, Cornyn's best buddy. So John, Thune is just as bad as John Cornyn, right? So John Thune has been behind Cornyn the entire time that he has been this rhino establishment scumbag. And he's like, you know what? That looks good to me. I'm going to go out and I'm going to support Pence, and I'm going to support McConnell, and I'm going to support Cornyn. By the way, I'm going to put $100 million, taxpayer dollars, RNC funding that we could be putting behind other candidates into John Cornyn. How much time and money has he put into the Save America Act when he went on vacation again last week, not passing any DHS funding, not passing any of the candidates that are waiting and getting these pro forma votes every week? None of that happened. He's on vacation back home barbecuing. By the way, hope you're enjoying that time, Thune, because your ass is on its way out. You will not win. You are going to get kicked to the curb, and everybody's pissed off. Not a moment on the Save America Act, 100 million into inshallah over here.
Yeah, you saw Steve Kornacki on MSNBC react like almost immediately at how decisive the victory was for Ken Paxton immediately. And so I think that the lesson is, bottom line, look, people want the SAVE Act. That's I think what it came down to. And so, for all the talk about, Talrico and, is this now a lean Republican seat as opposed to a likely Republican seat and all that stuff? I think if you keep it about the main thing, that same energy will, I think, and I would say this, we got a couple weeks to go, but if Steve Hilton ends up winning or finishing in the top 2 in California, I think it will largely be partly because of the strength of voter ID and the fact that we should require voter ID in elections in California as well. That's going to be something he's obviously in favor of. So, yeah, it's interesting to see if election integrity ends up mattering in elections across the country.
And I think to that point, if we're talking about California for a brief moment, a lot of people don't understand the jungle primary, which is basically whoever the top two are, totally unrelated to party. That's who goes into the final, primary race. And so then general election, right? So the top two right now on the ticket are Bianco and Hilton. So you've got two Republicans leading in California. Hasn't happened in God knows how long. I think a large part of that is that most people now are saying, you know what? I'm actually not in favor of crackheads and homeless everywhere as I walk my 5-year-old to kindergarten. Perhaps there's another way, right? And then the Palisades fire thing, right? We look at Bass, we look at Newsom. But here's the problem. So the jungle primary has worked for them for a very long time, and they've been able to lie, and now they got a lot of eyeballs on them. They've also got a great DA out there. I mean, that guy, Bill Elias, am I saying his name right?
Mm-hmm.
He's phenomenal, and he's done some pretty bold moves. I'm like, okay, so you're definitely a Republican, and you are in the bastion of Democrat, demonization of all things. And they just passed the Nick Shirley Act, not allowing people to do investigative journalism. I'm like, I'm so sorry. This is the party of freedom, right? Have you heard of the First Amendment, or did you miss that page? Did you just went to page 2? I don't know what happened. Anyways, I digress. But they want to get away and stop that jungle primary. Newsom is saying he's got some tools in his bag to kick that jungle primary out and now put something else into effect so that they don't end up with the top two contenders. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, I don't know how that works. I really don't. I don't know how the governor comes in and does that.
Well, remember, they had a constitutional amendment that said you're supposed to have a nonpartisan independent commission draw the redistricting lines for the congressional seats, and they did away with that, right? And they just passed this initiative. So, I mean, they kind of make it up as they go along in California. The good news, everything's working great in California.
Oh, yeah.
So it's a model for governance. No big deal.
Absolutely, doing well. So since we're talking about the Save America Act, I think we have a cut of Tim Burchett. Tim Burchett, obviously a stalwart in the House. This guy is no nonsense, just tells it like it is. And he was in a meeting last week as they were breaking for Memorial Day, and he was out of his mind angry. He was working till like 1-2 o'clock in the morning. He was in the Capitol, and he was like, I just was in this meeting. It was a closed door meeting with Senate and House members, Dems and Republicans. And I watched our leadership completely and totally capitulate to the Democrats and give them everything they wanted. And he said, and we, as the House, obviously this final push is happening in the Senate, have no control over what Thune and these other assholes are doing. So he's been great on the SAVE Act. This is a really good cut of him sort of explaining what is happening with the SAVE Act. It's a little long. We'll probably cut out into a minute in it, but I do think it's worth listening to. Anything you want to add to that?
No, I think it's perfect. It's a weird trend. I think we have this, and then we have, I think, Susie Wiles after this, and I think it's all kind of connected because at the end of the day, I think people are kind of waking up to like, hey, we have real problems in this country when it comes to elections, and we got some recent evidence of what happens if we don't take election integrity seriously.
No, I agree. Let's play this one.
Hey, everybody, Tim Burchett. People are asking me about what's going on with the Save America Act. Well, the Senate, of course, is dragging their feet. The House has passed it twice. I've got a sneaking suspicion that they'll probably attempt to pass it or pass it so late in the dadgum game that it can't get implemented. And then they can go home and say, oh, look, we passed it, and everybody will be celebrating, patting them on the back. And then it just cannot get implemented at the state and local level in time for it to have any effect in these elections. And ultimately, I think that's what you've got. And I'm afraid in the Senate leadership, they have such a hatred of Trump and the conservative movement. They want things to go back to the status quo, which is them being called from the golf course by the Democrats when it's time to make a vote. And they do the obligatory, oh, we don't like what they're doing. And they get their crumbs off the side of the table and for their districts, and they go home and get reelected. And I'm afraid that's exactly what they're up to.
So I have to tell you, everything about this I love. I love that he is at home. I love that he's in front of his garage. I love that he is just talking to us. I love it. I think it's incredible that he takes that time on what looks like probably a Sunday morning. He's probably heading to church And he's just like, I don't have an answer. He goes, they're going to do this in such a way that we get every establishment asshole and every liberal elected and every conservative buried, but they're going to do it in a way where they pass it, just not in a way they can implement it.
I think you're right. I think he came home from church and got, took off the shirt and tie. It's undershirt Tim Burchett is like elite Tim Burchett. You know what I mean? Like I liked the brown coat before, but now it's summertime. So we have to do a new look in the video. But yeah, look, he's telling the truth.
Yeah.
And he's talking directly to the American people.
Yes.
And, we've had a chance to interview him before. He's great.
Yes.
He's so no nonsense. And my favorite thing about it, he sponsored a bill, I think, to make it legal to eat roadkill in his home state. So I know.
I did not know that.
So he's.
I don't know that I'm behind that. It's kind of, I'm not into tires.
A man of the people. Okay, big government. So listen.
I'm not saying you can't do it. I'm just saying I don't want to be at dinner that night.
No, I think the reality is that because so many people want to know. I mean, that's why I think that explains the Ken Paxton, John Cornyn result. People are like, why are we not doing this?
Yeah.
And so he's like, look, I think it's just because they like the status quo. They think by not doing radical things like requiring voter ID, they're actually protecting the party because they think like middle of the road is what wins. Democrats lose because they're too extreme. They actually think voter ID requirements are too extreme on the right side. They're insane, but that's what happens when you hang out in the bubble of Washington, D.C. for 2 decades. It's
honestly so well said. I watch Tim Burchett, I watch Luna, I see Mike Lee and Rick Scott, and it is such a struggle for them, right? And then you have these people, the Lindsey Grahams and the McConnells, and they vacillate in these weird worlds where it's like, can you just show me your bank account? I just want to see it. I want to see who has wired you money in the last 6 months, just for shits and giggles, just to see how they would act, right? Because what we are seeing every time is once we uncover, like the Cornyns and the Thunes, where your money's coming from, like, douchebag Massey wants to stand up there and say, oh, I wanted to call my, to concede, but, he was in Tel Aviv. I'm like, you're taking money from Soros and Qatar. Why don't you shut your trap and stop? Everybody knows you're a big slut. You had a lot of fun. You're doing a lot of things. And, this girlfriend comes out and is talking about that he's some kind of like evil Knievel in the bedroom asking her to submit and do all this other gross stuff. And she's a former staffer for Boebert. And she's like, I had to leave the Capitol because he was so controlling and psychotic. Meanwhile, his wife was only gone a month. I'm like, what the hell's going on? I thought that, like, is everybody there just a deviant? I guess so.
Well, they say politics is Hollywood for ugly people.
Oh, girl, well
and so, but yeah, I would say, the SAVE Act, I think, can actually be helped dramatically and significantly if what Susie Wiles is talking about does come to fruition. So I think the White House maybe still has some cards to play on this. You found this clip.
Yeah.
I can't believe it's been 3 weeks since it was played. I haven't seen this anywhere.
Yes.
And it is kind of one of those like record scratch, like, wait, what? Because Susie Wiles is not one that's prone to hyperbole or exaggeration. Right? She's very understated. She's measured. So for her to say this, I think was significant, not just for like what it would have meant historically, but what it might mean moving forward for the passage of the SAVE Act specifically.
Correct.
Okay. When you first started working with President Trump, what was the biggest, this is not what I was briefed for moment?
I did not go into the White House in 2016. The 2020 election, I ran Florida. And then when he came back to Florida after leaving the White House, he called me and invited me to dinner, which I was not in the inner circle. I was just overwhelmed. I couldn't imagine why. I drove down to Mar-a-Lago, which I think he thought I live, 10 minutes from there, but it's really 4 hours. And we had a lovely dinner, and at the end of it, he wanted to know why he won Florida, but maybe struggled in some other states that I think we're going to find out he actually did win. But I wrote like an after-action report, gave it to him to read, and as I was going out the door, he said, I have a PAC, and I think it has money in it, but I'm not sure, and I'm not sure who works there. Can you take that over? And I said, well, sir, I have a job. He said, no, you can do it in your free time. You can get it done in a week or so. And I did. So here I am.
Very good.
So I think the high level of that is I've actually never seen her humorous ever.
Mhm.
Like she's always so like, it's all about business. And by the way, you're in my way. So I'm like, I don't ever want to piss her off, you know? But it's that moment where she says, I think we're going to find out that he actually won a bunch of those states. It's so passing. It's not anything you would hear. It's not anything you would notice. Like, it's just one of those things where you're like, wait, what did she just say? And then you hear it and you go, oh shit. So it is real, because those of us who raised those questions following 2020, and we looked at these, you know, to go down a rabbit hole for a hot second. And there's no one better to talk to, ladies and gentlemen, than Eric Eggers about this, because he did direct the movie The Creepy Line. He had this movie out in 2018, right, Eric? Am I wrong?
Well, The Creepy Line came out in 2018. Yes. We talk about how Google and Facebook can, you know, kind of manipulate and shift opinions and voting behavior. And then my book about election fraud also came out in 2018. But, and, you know, and I'm talking to people, I know you're talking to people, and actually, like, you know, issues surrounding the 2020 election is kind of how we first got connected to, like, start looking at some of this stuff. And I think, you know, the things you hear now from the people on the ground about Fulton County ballots, the things you hear now from people in some of these other states with some questions, right? Whether it's Michigan or Wisconsin, I do think, I think, you know, it's amazing what happens when people are, they now have access to stuff. And to me, you know, we talk about California and Chad Bianco. I thought it was very telling when in that California redistricting initiative, he was seized as sheriff, I think, of Riverside County, seized 650,000 ballots because he had an independent citizens group say, look, we think there's a discrepancy here of about 40,000 ballots versus like what the records say were cast versus what the official people say were counted. So like, we just want to look at it. So to me, it's like, hey, the vote's over. So this guy wants to do an investigation, look at these things. And the Supreme Court stopped him. And so what I'm saying is, like, that's basically what happened after 2020. The posture of all these kind of overseeing courts has been, no, we're not allowed to look at it. You're not going to do it. Even though there's no threat to, I think, you know, no one's being suppressed to vote by looking at what's happened. It's already done. But now that they're back in the White House and they've got, you know, kind of good relationships with some of these key states. I think, to me, that's what that Susie Wiles quote says, is that they've got access to stuff now that they can look at. And, you know, and obviously big tech's not actively censoring the way they were in the aftermath of 2020. So stay tuned. I mean, you know, I don't think anybody would be really shocked to say, oh, wow, wait, really? That whole tranche of ballots that came at 2 a.m., there's some real questions about that.
Yeah.
And if it was, then I think all it does is provide momentum for this push to have common sense election integrity reforms, including voter ID.
Yes. And I believe beyond that point as well is we're talking about those mail-in ballots. We are looking at the mail-in ballot is such a pervasive part of the election integrity conversation. And sure, if you want to give it to, you know, absentee ballots for those who are maybe serving abroad, right? Or they're in Iran, they're in Poland, they're being stationed somewhere, fine. But one of the things that we saw, and I specifically talked to a lot of people who witnessed this, was we had people that were literally, they had worked the polls, like my dad works the polls. You know, he's worked them for 30 years and he knows Harry and Joe from down the street, and they come in, hey, Harry, who are you voting for? And it's blah, blah, blah. You know, it's no big deal. But what they started to see was these mail-in ballots that were pristine, clean, perfectly filled out ovals, right? So if you're like the rest of America, you get your ballot, it comes in, it sits on the kitchen table, in your car, under your keys, your coffee cup. It is not pristine, right? There's nothing pristine about living life. It is a hot mess, and that's on a good day. So the idea that like thousands of ballots came in, so people started to call and people started to ask, hey, anybody else see this? Oh yeah, you know, and thousands of people were reporting the same thing. And suddenly everybody who reported something that seemed like an outlier was a conspiracy theorist, right? Because conspiracy theorist, tinfoil hat, I never heard of these expressions. Suddenly they were mainstream, right? And it was so odd to me because I felt like it was like 2020 election and COVID were these two psyops by our government and by what I would call, you know, this big government, deep state, these operatives. Man, they were so ready and we were so not ready, right? Because we're living life honestly. So when somebody starts to do something really sort of off kilter, you're like, wait, what? Oh shit, you guys are like really doing this. And I'm telling you, when I saw Bibb County in Georgia, when I saw Fulton County in Georgia, when I saw Pima County in Arizona, when I saw things that were happening out in Delco in Pennsylvania, and whole computer shut down. And I'm like, Okay. No, nobody thinks this is weird. Or exact flips of votes. These were Joes
Right.
and now they're Trumps, and these were Trumps and now they're Joes. Okay. What the hell's going on? And now we're finally getting to it 6 years later, 6 years too late, because it's May and the elections are in November.
Yeah, 6 years too late. But if you, but again, that's where the momentum comes, right? And I think if this, we'll see what the response is of the people in the Senate to the Paxton win, because I think that shows you, like, hey, this is what the people want.
Yeah.
So there are real consequences. You either pass or you don't, and we'll find out. But I think the Susie Wiles, if she's suggesting or signaling something that could be unveiled, I think that would actually be a real boost to the effort to.
I agree. And I think once they are allowed, I'm assuming they have a ton of legal behind them. But I'm assuming once they're allowed to say something, it's going to be like floodgates, just like we're getting the information now on the raid in Trump in Mar-a-Lago. Now that we're getting all that information, everybody's like, so everything was a big lie? Cool. All right. So in other news, we have somebody that is, I think, probably the biggest loser of the week. And I love Representative Randy Fine. I know you know him well. And he is actually calling for this Democrat congressional candidate. She's refusing to pledge the Pledge of Allegiance. She's in these Sacramento council meetings, and I guess whoever's drawing the meeting is like, everybody turn around, say the Pledge of Allegiance. What a novel idea. And this bitch literally faces forward, does not put her hand on her heart, and puts her head down. I don't even know why she stood up. I'm like, why are you standing up? You don't want to pledge. But in any event, for those of you listening in your car, this is congressional candidate Vang, V-A-N-G. She stands up, she doesn't pledge, and they all say the pledge. She stands awkwardly. Anything you'd like to add, sir?
No, but I just think this is like, this plus the next thing I think we'll talk about, which is the tweet from Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Fry. I think they're connected in a significant way. And it does speak to like this problem that I don't know the Democrats will ever be able to fix, at least not with this current crop of candidates and the mentality that seems so pervasive. It's just, I thought the biggest reason why Kamala Harris lost is when she said, I love this country. I'm so proud of this country. I just don't think it rings as authentically true. And videos like the one we're about to watch are honestly why.
Pledge allegiance.
Absolutely. Hands over heart. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. And Madam.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm sorry. If I was running that meeting, I'm sorry, Vang. Did you break your arms? Do you have a non-bending elbow? Like, what is the problem?
Well, and especially consider this, right? I mean, they're in California. So I'm old enough to remember when the mayor of a town in California was recently exposed as being like on the take with Chinese spies. You've got another former member of the House in California, Eric Swalwell, obviously had his own entanglements with some Chinese espionage officials. So it's not insane to suggest that maybe some elected officials are, let's call it, at least divided in their allegiance and not completely loyal to the United States. Peter Schweitzer, who I work with, and you are the excellent producer of our podcast, has exposed how many actual elected officials in Mexico live in the United States. So, I mean, we're getting to a place where pledging allegiance to the American flag is not just performative or perfunctory, but it's actually significantly necessary loyalty test. So when somebody chooses not to do that, it's worth paying attention to.
Well, here's my thing, and this is something that, it's the age-old question. If you hate it so much here, if it's so bad here, if you feel that your hand cannot reach to your heart for a country that you wish to represent in its government, what are you doing here? There are so many places you could go that will tell you you're not allowed to do anything. You can stand there perfectly still for 12 hours a day and be subjected to slave labor. God knows there's plenty of socialist and communist countries. Why are you here? What are you doing here? If you don't like what our pledge stands for, why are you running for government? I mean, shit, at least stay in your house. What are you doing at the meeting? Go home, Vang, get out.
It's that country, ironically. It's the country whose laws allow you to run for and hold elected office, right? So
it's so true. It's like I remember this line from the movie American President, where Michael Douglas delivers that epic line where he says,
"Oh yeah,
part of our country is loving our flag and then allowing us to have the freedom to watch somebody else burn it in front of you." The problem is burning it is now the normal, and loving it makes you weird. Loving it means, we haven't addressed our white privilege, or we can't talk about this because it's black on white crime and it's racist to identify people as the race that they are that are committing the crime. I'm like, we were recently watching a show. I don't know if you've seen this. It's the guy who did Yellowstone. It's called The Madison. Have you heard of it?
Mm-hmm.
It's Kurt Russell and
No.
Michelle Pfeiffer.
I pretty much spend most of my time reading scripture and in a prayer room. And so this
He's so full.
worldly television you speak of is interesting to me, but also inaccessible and a threat to my own spiritual sovereignty. So,
hands up, bitch, because it's about to get real threatening. Michelle Pfeiffer's in this episode, and her daughter gets accosted, and she's unable to identify the perp because she doesn't want to say that he's black because she thinks it's racist. And the cop is black, and he's like, "Okay, I don't understand what's happening. Does he look like me, or does he look like my partner who's white?" And that's hilarious, dude. I laughed so hard because I was like, "That's real. It is real. I don't see color." Except for when I have to see color, and then it's awkward because just shut up. You know who the racist people are? I'll show you who the racist people are. In Newark, New Jersey right now, we have people protesting ICE. So 2 guys walk out in front of the protesters. They happen to be brown. And so the protesters think that they've released 2 illegal aliens and they're cheering. Well, the ICE agents behind the fence are like, "You freaking morons. They work here. You're idiots." I mean, it's classic. Do you have anything you want to add to that? Have you seen this?
No, this is good. This is like, I have a thing to say after, but this is good.
Classic.
That's racist. They just assume. Yeah, they just assume that they got racist.
So this guy's behind the fence and he goes, "You guys are so racist. You think because they're brown, they can't work here." And I'm like, dude, this is so epic. That whole moment there. And so the officers behind the gate are black. It looks like either a black or Latino woman, a white guy, and they're just like, "You guys are so dumb. So dumb."
Yeah. There was it reminds me of, and I like Rick Scott a lot. I think he's done a good job, but when he was governor, he always, made an effort to try to reach out and try to appeal to people. So they had a protest at his mansion, and it was a group called Dream Defenders. So like this, like kind of young, a lot of younger African-Americans showed up, and they kind of protesting, like, I think it was like a social justice thing. And so he comes out and he's trying to like connect with them. He goes, "Listen, guys, I'm a lot like you. I grew up in government housing. I kind of did all this stuff." And then somebody from the back goes, "Not all of us are poor." And it's just true, like, but it's the same thing. It's like, they mean like, Ned, not every Hispanic is actually a detainee in this ICE facility.
And it's also the flip side, right? Like, not every white person you see was born with a silver spoon. Some of us were poor too, and that's the whole thing, right? The messaging from the left is so loud. Like, I was shocked the other day to see Hassan Piker actually admit that he was getting his funding from Neville Singham, who you know all too well about because you and your group have done amazing research. I strongly recommend everybody go to the drilldown.gai.org to see it. They crushed this information on his whole group, but nobody even blinked. I'm like, I'm sorry. Right. You guys know this is a communist piece of shit that is sending money into the United States, and he lives in China. He's not here.
Sending money into the United States with the stated goal of trying to cause division and like basically wage this kind of like unrelenting warfare against our nation's kind of like mental and emotional well-being. We just, in the latest episode of the Drill Down, Peter Schweitzer made the point of, we played a clip from a Medal of Honor winner who defended this country on the battlefield in Afghanistan. And he goes, but we face threats from abroad, not just on the battlefield, but like everywhere, on the phones, on the computer, through TikTok, through Neville Singham, through these finance groups that we've documented in our reports called Riot Inc.
Yeah.
It's a real thing.
And so
that's a bigger deal about the Hassan Piker, Roy Singham stuff.
Yeah, we definitely do another show on that for sure. So last clip of today. So we talked about this scumbag Dem candidate, Vang, and how she's unable to bring her hand to her heart, for the country she so desperately wants to represent. And Joey Jones took to X over Memorial Day. So Joey Jones is a W amputee I think it's from his knees down. I think one leg might be higher, but he's a great guy. I've known Joey a long time, and I just think the world of him. And he's a good dad, good broadcaster, served our country honorably. And so he sees scumbag Jacob Fry put this post out that he's going to remember George Floyd on Memorial Day. I'm sorry.
I saw it and I was shocked, and I went to double check. Jacob Fry did later post about Memorial Day, but the fact that he posted about George Floyd first is insane. And again, it speaks to I'm sorry, you hate to say it and speaking like blanket stereotypes, but Democrats have a patriotism problem.
Yes, they do.
And and just from why are we divided in this country? There should be nothing that we take more collective pride in, and in a unifying way. The people who have sacrificed on behalf of this country, right? They gave their todays for our tomorrows.
Yes.
We are the land of the free because of the brave. And there is no greater thing we should all be able to take pride in than that. Yeah. And so for you to then kind of elevate a divisive figure like George Floyd on the day that's meant to be set aside to remember the fallen, I think is a choice. And I think it's a choice that actually will continue, that will color the way I think most people see Democrats and the way they think about this country moving forward in a way that won't be helpful to them, I don't believe.
No, and I also think what's very sad is the same people that are screaming that they hate veterans, they hate war. Nobody likes war. Nobody's out there going, yay, war. Everybody's like, shit, this sucks. But I feel so blessed that I have a 100% volunteer-based military. Many other countries, it's required service, mandatory service. This country is a 100% volunteer service. So you only have to protect your nation if you love it enough to put your life on the line. And there are a very small portion, a very small, brave few that do that. So the audacity to take Memorial Day of all days, if you want to be an asshole and say that any other day, all right, go be an asshole and say it. But Memorial Day, really, bro? This is the moment?
And oh, by the way, is anyone sitting around refreshing Twitter like, I hope somebody says something about George Floyd today? I'm sure it was the anniversary of his death, but I think we would have been. I don't know. I don't know that there's a huge constituency for that. But yeah, here's Jacob Fry.
And I agree.
Yeah.
I really just don't understand. This is an image. So for those of you who are listening and not watching, we basically have Mayor Jacob Fry, who says, today we remember George Floyd, who was murdered by a former Minneapolis police officer 6 years ago. That moment changed our city forever. And Joey Jones then says, do you want to read this part, Eric?
He says, you, sir, can blank right off. Today
you couldn't do it. He's such a good boy. So he says, you, sir, can fuck right off. Today is for heroes. And you know what? That he is so spot on with that. Not to mention the fact in the past week, we have gotten a resurgence of the full autopsy report of George Floyd. So I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole of George Floyd or tell you all the things I think about George Floyd, but I would invite you to do your own research and take a strong, close look. Perhaps, take a few minutes, read the whole thing, get to the second page. Again, don't be a headline hero. Read the whole thing. And also remember that George Floyd, while he died during an interaction with a police officer because he was in the middle of robbing a store while high on fentanyl and methamphetamine, caffeine, and several other things that were in his system, which if any of you have ever seen people on these drugs, they have extreme strength, but we'll just leave that there for a moment. Putting all of that to the side, this is a man who held a pregnant woman with a knife to her belly, and he robbed her in the middle of a burglary. This is a person with a very long rap sheet. To honor him on Memorial Day is truly an atrocity of just the utmost proportions.
You know what? That's actually an excellent point, because it's one thing to at the moment say, listen, I believe that the death of George Floyd is regrettable and a tragedy, and something that you can rightfully ask questions about, and want to hold people responsible, accountable. That's a totally separate thing. To then elevate and memorialize him, right? Literally over the people who have died for this country, because in terms of order of operations, in terms of your social media stuff, no, it's ridiculous. And it actually reminds me very much, to kind of come full circle, of the John Cornyn Inshallah and Ramadan post. No one's waiting on you to say anything about this.
No.
Everyone else would be just fine. It's performative. It's insincere, and ultimately that's why it comes off as disrespectful.
Yes, and Cornyn, to that point, he was all ready to talk about inshallah, but had nothing to say about the 9-year-old child brides walking around the state of Texas. Super quiet about that. Just wondering, keeping it proportionate, just asking questions. Why not? It's my right? Anyways, you guys, thank you for joining us. This is episode 7 of Soundbytes. Eric is laughing at me as per usual.
Well, I'm just laughing because we started with center mass and we ended with child brides. Like Lynda McLaughlin, everybody. Welcome to the show.
This is the Rogue Recap. We're here to say all the things you're thinking because you're afraid to say them. And we're happy to help. That's what I'm here for. I got the guns. I got the hat. I got the flag. I'm all in, Anyways, check us out online, roguerecap.com. He is Eric_Eggers on X. I am at Lynda Mick at Rogue Recap. Be safe. Pray for our troops. And we'll see you next time.